Hi, my name's Andy Schofield, and I'm one of the co-organizers of Columbus Web Group. Today we're continuing our series, Where Are They Now? And I'm joined by Ben Callahan. In 2017, Ben presented at Columbus Web Group, and so we're going to talk to him today. Ben?
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So in 2017, you said most projects fail because of communication or an expectation problem. Do you feel like that's still true today?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. No matter what topic I talk about or my partner talks about, we always come back to this idea that the real challenges we face are rarely around the technology and the tools and all that. A lot of times it has to do with just putting people with different life experiences in the same room and asking them to work together. So communication, setting expectations, those things, at least in my experience, tend to be the things that cause challenges for sure.
And what impact does culture have on communication problems?
Yeah, that's man, it's crazy to think about the last, I don't know, 18 months or whatever, and how things have changed so much for us as a culture. Thinking about what's happening in the world, whether it's police violence, whether it's political challenges that we're having, in terms of relating with each other, or whether it's even, a coronavirus or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All those things are impacting us individually and also as a community. And so they make, those stressors, or things that we're dealing with outside of work, we bring that with us to work, and we bring those challenges, the stress. And so I think it's more important now than it's ever been that we're figuring out ways to make sure that we're being clear with each other, we're being transparent, giving people space to take time and rest and actually come to work recharged and ready to kind of give it their all. So I think I would say culturally it's been a very stressful time. I think everybody feels that, and trying to make space for folks in the workplace is really important for that too.
Yeah, and in your last talk, you mentioned you hire the whole person, and I feel like that's this really interesting timing, considering Basecamp has been in the news about basically taking an opposite stance. One might argue. What do you think about that when you say you hire the whole person, and how important that is to creating a human-centered culture?
Wow, that's a good one, man. The whole Basecamp controversy has been pretty wild to watch. I think when I first read the post from Jason that kind of kicked off the announcement, it's weird. It's like as a leader, as an owner of a business, I think many of us in the industry looked up to those two for a long time. I've read a book or two of theirs. I think reading that, it's very easy to fall into that mentality of, this work is really hard, like putting, lots of people with different perspectives, creating a culture that is truly inclusive, asking hard questions, having hard conversations. That's not easy stuff. And so when things are difficult, it's very tempting to revert to what we know, which is, hey, you didn't come here to talk about politics or to talk about issues in society. We're hiring you for this little bit of your person, right? We want you to write code, or we want you to design something, or we want you to do research, or whatever it is. I just fundamentally don't believe that we can do the best work that we possibly can if we're ignoring the other parts of the people involved. So while it's tempting, I think, especially if you come from, a group of people who aren't impacted by a lot of these things, or are less impacted, it's very tempting to just say, leave that stuff at home, come here and do your job, But man, I think down in my core, I think I just believe that if we want to do better work, we need all of that experience that people have in their life. They have to bring that to the work. And that's how we can create more inclusive design. That's how we can create experiences using the technologies we have that are good experiences for more people, because we're incorporating the experiences we have outside of the workplace into the work we do. So I think that's still my philosophy, at least the way that we approach things at Sparkbox. And I know I know the leadership team that we have is in agreement with that idea. So that's kind of how we have approached it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a great way to approach it. I'd be curious, what do you think happens when you take the opposite, when you say you're only here to code, you're only here to design? Like, what are some of the things, in your opinion, that come out of a decision like that?
Well, I kind of think that's what most businesses have done for the longest time, you know. So what do we get? I mean, I think if you take 2 people who studied computer science, who grew up with a privileged background, and you put them on a project, and then you take 10 people with the same background and put them on the same project, the results aren't going to be that different because you're not increasing the different perspectives that are approaching the work, right? So, you know, I think the real difference is that the quality of work can be better when you bring in different perspectives. This has been proven time and time again. If you look at the studies, I wish I could quote them to you, but I know I've read many studies. In fact, in the presentation I gave, I think I did quote a few, where, you know, they look at just bringing different perspectives to a problem, and the results are always more creative. It's just a better solution when you include lots of perspectives. And so I think as part of what we've always tried to do is we've always talked about this idea of being better. You know, we say our processes, our policies, everything, it's always fighting for its life because there's always potentially a better approach. And so we try to leave space to be wrong. We try to leave space to iterate and evolve the way that we do the work. And I think, you know, as part of being better, that means I want the work to be better. I want our clients to be more impressed each time they work with us. And so, you know, at some point, if we want to be better, we can't just have the same, you know, sort of monoculture doing the work. We need lots of interesting perspectives, lots of different life experiences. And that's going to actually make the work better. Plus, it's just the right thing to do.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and so you talk about like diversity of perspectives, and I feel like that sort of leads to discussions on collaboration. And you talked about a framework for valuable collaboration. Yeah. Do you still believe this framework is accurate today?
Yeah, I think when I was doing a lot of the thinking that I shared in that talk, it was probably the 2 years prior to that date, you know, in 2017, that I was thinking a lot about, you know, as an organization, I think we were really looking around and seeing that we weren't that diverse, and that was an area where we needed to grow. But before we tried to even grow in terms of bringing folks with different perspectives in, I think we had a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of work to do, looking just internally at ourselves and making sure the culture we have is welcoming to everybody. So we kind of started with that. And I think in terms of how it's changed, you know, for us, I think you sort of take on that, you know, approach of like, let's focus on diversity, let's focus on inclusion, let's focus on equity. You think about those things, and it seems like this sort of course we want, you know, of course it's what we want, but when you get into the work, it's not easy. I mean, it is very difficult. And this is why we talked about Basecamp. I'm sure this is why they landed on the decision they landed on, because it's not easy to do it. Especially when you think about turnover, you know, if you have folks coming and going, you know, in your business. We're really fortunate that we have a very low turnover, but I'm trying to imagine how you would even have time to sort of build trust with people if people are coming and going every 3 or 4 years, you know. I think for us, to your question more directly about how has that changed, I think the core of it is still very true. It's still something we aspire to. I think I've had the realization over the last 5 years at just how difficult it really truly is to have an organization where people know each other, trust each other, are willing to look beyond their differences and still be able to work well with each other. And so it's just a journey, man. It's like a continual process of learning. You know, I just feel like I'm a baby in that area. I have so much to learn, but I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by people who care about those things too, so we can kind of help each other along, you know. I don't know that I would change the framework a lot. I think there's probably a lot of pre-work that might be good if an organization is thinking about taking that approach to essentially kind of like till the ground, you know, before you can kind of get the seeds into the garden or whatever. That seems like a good thing to do. We've engaged with an outside consultancy to come and help us with a lot of those things. I think as an organization, we've had this culture of iteration in the work, which a lot of design development shops do. We try to get an idea built and tested, and then we learn from the testing and we evolve it. And we've always said that we do the same with our business. We want to prototype the business, you know, in the same way that we do the work. The challenge is these are very sensitive issues. And so I don't know that it's necessarily appropriate in the same way that it is maybe with other policies to say, we're just going to prototype this. You know, part of me, and my partner and I were talking a couple weeks back about, is it okay for us to say we're just trying to figure things out when it's a subject like diversity or inclusivity or equity that is, it makes a huge difference in people's lives. And, you know, we have 50 some people as employees now, and we're growing up, you know, we're trying to figure out how do we scale these ideas beyond, you know, 20 or 30 people. And it's not easy, you know. I know deep down that it's worth it, and I know deep down it's the right thing to do. So I think we're just focused on trying to make sure that we do that in a really healthy way that kind of honors the experiences everybody brings, you know, to the work. So I don't know if I'm directly answering, but that's kind of where my head is.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, especially in agencies or any type of software development, where you're iterating on a design or an idea, that becomes very natural. And so I see that transition into like HR policies and things of that nature quite frequently. But you bring up a really good point that that's like a very important thing to people, and it has a lot to do with their well-being, especially at work. So I'm kind of curious, like, where is the decision point when you decide to iterate a policy?
Yeah. I think we're trying to figure that out, you know. Up to this point, we've kind of just always taken that approach. So I don't, you know, in general, that has always felt like a good way to do things. You know, my partner and I, we studied computer science. We were both programmers. I was more on the front end. He was more on the back end. That's kind of what we grew up doing. And, you know, before, you know, you start a business and you think, oh, I love writing code, so I'm going to start a business where I get to write code. And then you realize that's probably only about 25% of the time, you know, and that's when you're just getting started and it's a small group. You know, so now it's like, I don't do that at all anymore, you know, and I've had to find a way to transition. He and I both have had to find a way to transition into very different roles than we had. And so I think it's easy for folks like us or any other founders who start in that, you know, kind of doing in the work and now they're focused on the business. It's easy to say, well, I didn't have training for this, or, you know, make excuses. You know, I think I'm learning now that I have a lot of growth to do in terms of leadership, you know, because I just have always acted on instinct, you know, and that instinct has been good. It's gotten me, I think it's helped us to be sort of pure in our motives, you know, because the values that my partner and I both have held personally are the ones that have really kind of shown through in Sparkbox's values. So I think it's an authentic way to create a business, but it's also, there's a large responsibility that we have to our people. And so I think we're in a season now where we're really trying to figure out how do we lead, you know, using, you know, time-tested practices, you know, that there's a lot of work out there on how to be a good leader. And so I think that's kind of where I'm focused. Along with that comes conversations around how are we pouring into, you know, a leadership team, and having conversations around, is this a policy we can iterate on, or is this one we really need to do some deep thinking and get this right the first time, you know? So I think in general, much more open, asking lots of questions of our employees, doing more surveys to find out, how they feel about things before we put stuff into practice, trying as much as we can to involve them in those decisions, but still giving them space to do the work. It's a tricky balance. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in there. And I think when you're talking about diversity of perspectives, what goes into when you're looking at a founder or a business partner, kind of picking someone that has the right level of a diverse perspective?
Ooh, that's a tricky one, man. I'm sure you've heard people talk about their relationships with their business partners or co-founders as kind of like marriages. That is absolutely the case, at least in my experience. I think, if you're thinking about relationships like that, one of the things probably the core thing that how I've always approached it is with this idea of just finding alignment on values. In truth, this is kind of how we hire as well. We look for people who believe the same things that we believe in terms of their values, their approach to, for us, the web. But we're open to lots of different, lifestyles and life experiences. And so you can have many different experiences in this world, but you can have a common set of values. And so for my partner and I think that's kind of what has helped us a lot, is that we definitely have that same set of values. We're also really fortunate in that we get along very well. There's a couple other things that I think we have that make us a little bit unique. We're both very opinionated, but we're also both very willing to be wrong. It's very common for us to have sort of a general agreement on an idea, but for one of us to take the opposite of that and just dialogue very directly about it to kind of quickly get to a solution. And I think these days, as we're trying to scale all of that, it's a little different. We have a team of leaders that we try to bring into those conversations, and partly I think it's requiring the two of us to be a lot more patient, because where in the past maybe it was kind of everything was just on our shoulders and we could just make decisions quickly and move on. Now we're trying hard to let our leaders make those decisions, and not to stay out of it, but to give them space to figure things out. Obviously we could kind of top down mandate things, but that's not. And sometimes I think that's appropriate, but it's not for most of the decisions that we're trying to make. So, also our partnership is good because we're very different in terms of our skill sets. When we started, I was like a front end dev and he was a back end dev, and we would look at each other over our monitors and think, "You complete me," But these days we're not really doing that so much. But I'm more like a higher level kind of thinker, and he's much more operational. We have conversations with, a leadership coach, and he'll be talking with us, and I'm asking all these super high level questions, and my partner is like, "What's the date that we're talking about doing this?" I have to get all these other people involved in their schedules. There's a lot going on. So he's thinking about the tactical, and I'm more thinking, the strategic. And so it's a really good relationship in that way. I feel very fortunate to have found somebody that I think is a good fit with, and I know he feels the same. It's hard. It's not easy. I've had other partnerships in the past, and I'm still friends with those folks. But it's I think finding a relationship that can last deep, difficult situations, lots of time. I think that's very difficult to do. So I would say be careful, in making those choices. It's good to work with people before you make that choice. We did a stint together where we said, let's just run our own businesses separately and work with each other, before we started this business. And that was a good way to see, what kind of skill sets folks bring to the table, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, to me that sounds very similar to sort of some of your earlier themes where you're talking about iterating quickly, but not for the important stuff, not too quickly. And I know in your previous talk, you talked a lot about empathy. And so how important is empathy in a relationship like that, where you're working with someone at a very high level?
And empathy. So we have 3 what we call entry-level values. They're fluency. You have to be good at the job, or have a high ceiling, a lot of potential. Humility. You have to be good, but you can't think you're the best. There's always somebody a little better. We try to leave that space to stay in learning mode always, And then one that our final entry-level value is trust-based empathy. So we talk about this idea that when you're in a relationship with somebody, if there's trust and they're willing to share their experiences with you, your first reaction has to be that you trust that was their experience, So I think that is the key, at least for us, in how we've approached empathy. Empathy is like a buzzword, and especially if you're in like UX or design, there's a lot of talk of that, just empathy for our users, trying to understand the state of mind they're in when they're trying to accomplish the tasks that we're building for them, or the experiences we're building. But I think it's just as important, maybe more so, that on an internal team, we have that empathy with each other. And especially if you're trying to build a workplace that's welcoming to everybody, it doesn't work without it. In that framework that you referenced earlier, I say that empathy is like the grease, for collaboration. So you can have collaboration without it. It's just not very smooth, not very fluid, right? Empathy allows that collaboration to be, a little bit more fluid, a little bit more flexible, for us to feel like we're all participating, So I think it's a necessary ingredient for sure.
So if I was trying to build a team and I want to increase empathy, what piece of advice, if I was just starting out, might you give?
That's tough. It is a skill that can be learned for sure. I think we try to, when somebody starts at Sparkbox, I sit down with every person who comes in as an employee, and I walk them through our values. And I try to do that with just a lot of humility. Like part of that conversation is, look, we're not going to get this right all the time, but these values are the things that make us who we are. These are not what we aspire to be. These are actually who we are. And so I try in that moment to give every employee permission to call me if I'm not living those values. And I think like opening up the beginning of a relationship, an employer-employee relationship in that way, sets the groundwork for us to have very sort of honest, authentic, empathetic conversations. And in that conversation, I try to say, like, look, I am doing my best to stay in learning mode. That's it. It means that every apprentice that comes in our door, every designer, developer, project manager, back office team member, I have lots to learn from every single one of those people. And that means I have to like hear what they're actually saying to me, So, it's not easy, and I don't do that well every day, but at my best, that's what I try to do. Mm-hmm. I think going through difficult seasons, like right now we're, every organization is coming, it feels like slowly emerging from, a ridiculously difficult season, 4 or 5 years of kind of political chaos, just even if it doesn't matter what side of the political world you're from, like it was chaotic for all of us, there's a lot of things happening in the society right now. So I think that this has been a struggle. This season has been a struggle. And I think it sucks. Like there's no doubt about it. There's a lot of people who have truly been harmed by what's happened in our world over the last, 2 years, especially. But if we can survive it, if we can get to the other side, I think it is an opportunity for us to have stronger relationships, So struggling with people is one way for sure to grow that. there's lots of good resources out there for this. Brene Brown is is just an amazing author. She's got some great material on that. I don't know. It's a skill you have to practice, literally. Mm-hmm. I think demonstrating it in leadership is probably the best way to make it clear that that's the expectation inside of an organization. So.
Yeah, and one of the themes I feel like I've heard you say numerous times is also transparency. Especially in your previous talk, you talked about getting developer involved in reviewing contracts. How does transparency play into creating a human-centered culture?
Yeah, I mean, transparency. I think transparency combined with education is kind of like how I would probably frame it. It's interesting because my partner is very involved, kind of leads the financial side of our business. And so he spends a lot of time with our director of finance, just sitting down, looking at revenue, profit, expenses, all of that, And I think it's tempting when you embark on this journey of transparency to sit down with the whole team and say, here's what we made, revenue-wise, here's what our expenses were, this is what it leaves over. But the challenge with that is that there's a lot of education that needs to come with that level of transparency. So that's one example, financial. And in order to sort of do that in a healthy way, we try to when we provide data like that, we try to pair it with an educational component. So every month we do a coffee hour where my partner and I sit down and we talk through the financials with our company, and we talk with all of our employees. We talk through our values. We talk through whatever's happening in the business development side, any travel, if that is a thing we're going to be doing. And that is an opportunity for us to take a small piece of maybe a financial component and say, here's a new data point. We haven't talked about this before. Here's why it's important. Here's how it plays in with all of this, we're going through a season now where we're really digging in on our career frameworks, and that ties in with compensation, and not just how much do you make, but your total comp. What are the benefits that we offer? What's that worth to you? And so that has to come with education about what does it cost to have an employee. What does it cost to actually pay somebody? And I think it's really neat to see our team our directors sitting down with each employee, talking through their goals, thinking through their career, what it is that they want to do, what they want to be, that level of transparency in the conversation around how we figure out when is it time for a raise, and can the company afford raises right now, And I think that is the key to it, is like pairing that transparency with education. And in that way, we're all getting a little bit better, we're all learning. And we're also creating an environment where people can trust that the decisions are being made in a good way because they can see the process, So that's helped, I think, for us, is pairing those two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the themes really in creating a human-centered culture, which was the title of your previous talk, is investing in your humans. So you talk about creating transparency is an investment. If you were to pick one type of investment that you would make in your humans, what would it be?
Well, I will say, if I'm looking back at the last 2 years, one of the things that we've started to do is we've added a new benefit for all of our employees and all of their dependents above a certain age, which is basically free therapy, free mental health care, and the season we've gone through, I know we've hit on this a bit already, but it's created sort of an awareness for us that there's just a lot of stress outside of work, especially that people are dealing with. And so one of the things we felt like it was necessary to do was to find a way to make sure people have that help if they need it. So there's lots of options out there for that, but mental health is something that's finally kind of getting, losing some of the, stigma that it's had for a long time. And a lot of people are being a lot more open about that as a need. So I'm really glad that we've been able to do that. And I would encourage folks, if you are somebody who runs a business, it's not tremendously expensive to do that. And it's a benefit that is a true investment in the people on your team. So that's one thing that comes to mind,
So you've talked a lot about investing in employees. How have your employees invested in you, especially over the last year?
Yeah, I am. I'm very fortunate. It's been a rocky season for me in a lot of ways beyond the pandemic and the societal challenges, just in my personal life. And I'm very grateful for the people on my team. I have an amazing group of leaders who have really stepped up and kind of carried the business, my business partner especially, as I've kind of had to deal with a lot of things in my personal life, my family, and that kind of thing for the last year. I see it most, I think, in that kind of way. But I think, for us, we've also transitioned to being fully remote. Sparkbox started in Dayton, Ohio, in a little sort of loft apartment office, and for the first, 11 years, for the first 6 or 7 years, our culture was very location based. We literally would cook together in our office multiple times a week. Our families would all come in and eat lunch with us. I mean, it was it was just very driven by the location, We had a young gentleman on our team who wanted to move, but he didn't want to leave the business. He wanted to keep his job. And so he came in and sat down with Rob and I, and we I remember thinking to myself, we don't want to lose this guy. He's brilliant, And so maybe this is an opportunity for us to explore a little bit what remote looks like for us. And so he chose to move. He stayed with us. He did an amazing job working remotely. And from that point, it was like an opening of the door for us towards, being a lot more flexible in terms of where we hire people. We've always had a very remote friendly, we don't care where you are, and that's always kind of been the case. People could kind of come and go as they needed and just, get your work done kind of thing. But I think it scared us to hire people we had never physically met, in person. The most important job we have is bringing the right people into the business. That's every time especially when you're 10, 20 people, you hire one person. That's a huge percentage of who you are, So it's a very important decision. That's probably the most important decision that we make, is hiring. So we take that very seriously. It's kind of a long process. But we have transitioned to being fully remote. We literally closed we had 2 floors in an office space in Dayton that we closed. We have people now all over the U.S. There's, over 50 of us, and our apprenticeship is fully remote. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into doing that in a healthy way. And we have a ton to learn there. I think our employees have been really gracious with us through that, That's one of those areas where we've always said we're iterating, we're trying to figure this out. And so we've had employees sit down and look at our sort of standard, the document that we have that just describes how we work, and add whole sections on what does it look like to be remote. Our back office team have been champions in terms of supporting people, getting their offices set up, making sure their internet is working well, like they have everything that they need to be able to do their work and feel comfortable and confident doing it from home. In some ways, that was sort of thrust upon us like it was everybody else, but I think we were headed in that direction anyway. So I would say that's one way that our team has really invested in the business, is just helping us figure out the remote thing with a lot of grace, Trying to think what else.
Well, I think that is something a lot of people had to deal with, obviously, this last year. And so it feels to me like you sort of had a bit of a head start on that.
Yeah, we were thinking about it kind of already, and half our team was already remote. So that hybrid state is not an easy state to be in. People who are remote tend to sort of feel like second-class citizens when half the team is in one office and can just pop over and talk to people. So I think it's probably healthier for us to be fully remote at this point. And there's, in some ways, you save a lot of money. You don't have the space, costs and that kind of thing. But we hope to, once everybody's vaccinated and feeling healthy and able to commit to this kind of thing, we hope to get our whole team together a couple times a year and just have some time like that where we can actually connect again. And our team has been great about planning lots of interesting remote activities for people to do just to get to know each other. We still do, I think it's like every other week we do a donut, which is just a kind of a random pairing of 3 or 4 people just to get on a call for a half hour and catch up, So things like that are helpful. You do open doors and those coffee hours help. And there's just opportunity for people, to in an organic way kind of connect. I think that's been helpful too.
So it sounds like Sparkbox has made the decision to go fully remote. A lot of companies are struggling with the decision to do hybrid, fully remote, or in person.
We were headed that way. It kind of forced our hand. We basically paid for our space for a year and just didn't really use it. And we had a lot of space. We have meetup space too, and no meetups were happening. We have we had a whole classroom set up. I'm torn on the whole remote thing. I'm a very social guy. I'm an extrovert, and I definitely miss some of the times that we had as a business, being smaller, cooking together, or just that social side of it. I definitely miss that, but I just don't think it's realistic. Especially if you think about growing your pool of people to hire from. If you want to have a more diverse team, you need to have a bigger pool that you're pulling from. And if that's only based on your location, you're somewhat limited based on the demographics of your location. So you open up to remote, and all of a sudden the pool of people you're pulling from is massive, So I think that's one factor. I think flexibility is a whole nother factor. And just like we do have a very small office now. We moved it it's a tiny little building in Bellbrook, Ohio. It's just small town, there's a handful of spots to work there. If people really feel they need to, or if we needed to get our leadership team together, we could bring them all to Dayton area and do a meeting or something. But our clients aren't here, they're all over. We've always worked remotely with our clients. So in some ways, this is like just putting us on the same footing in terms of our interactions with each other as we've always had to do with our clients, So for us, it's the right call. It's not probably for everybody, And so I think it's sitting down and making the list, like we did a big survey with all of our employees to find out, how do you feel about working remotely? Is there a way we could do this that would be better, that would solve some of the problems you have with it? And honestly, most of the problems we had were being hybrid. Doing a meeting where 6 people are in a conference room and 3 people are remote. Well, it's just like you got a mic on the table and like somebody's tapping their pencil and it's like banging in somebody's ear who they're remote, and it's simple stuff like that you don't even know. You don't have that experience, so you don't know because you're not remote. So putting us all on the same playing field, I think leveling it made it better for everybody, It's different, and it means that we're trying to find ways to create the same energy and engagement that we had in person, trying to find ways to do that remote. And I think everybody's trying to figure that out, So
I think that's
tricky.
That's really tricky, and it's common, everyone's dealing with that right now. Do you feel like making the decision to go fully remote has improved the way that you work with clients who are remote?
I think so. Because we have to be better at being remote culturally, that means every interaction that we've always had remotely with clients is better. All the benefits that we have by getting better cameras and microphones and all of that set up for everyone, better lighting, all of those things benefit our interactions with our clients as well. Clarity and communication is better. We're better at documenting things because that's just, it's a necessity, So yeah, I would definitely say it's better.
So earlier you discussed going full remote and the decisions around that, and including getting rid of your office space, which had dedicated community space. So now as we look forward into the future and look at meetup groups restarting, community events happening again, how do you plan to approach that in a heavily remote environment?
I wish I had a great answer for you. The truth is there's a lot of hesitation still from folks, I think, to participate in in-person events. We have been running online what we're calling an unconferences. We ran one in late spring of 2020 because we looked around when the pandemic started and all the events got canceled, and we had half our team that was preparing talks ready to go out and speak at events. And so we had developed already a lot of good content. So we thought, let's just let people talk, So we kind of quickly organized a little event called the Unconf. And it went really well. We had over 1,000 people sign up and 700 and some people attend. And it was just really cool, And so we decided this year, 2021, to do 4 smaller events, one each quarter. So we've done one of those, and we have another one coming up at the end of June. And I think in our minds, the way that we've been trying to sort of replicate the community aspect of what we've always done is we're trying to meet people where they are, and our community events were always focused around really good content. That's a thing. We always wanted it to be driven by people having a desire to get better at their craft. But also we were trying really hard to create spaces that were safe for everybody. And so I think now we're presented with a different set of challenges technologically. How do we stream things, or how do we, have people ask questions? We were a little nervous in our first Unconf, because we didn't know how to create that psychological safety where in an event where people can essentially be anonymous. So the first Unconf from this year, which was our second attempt, we did open things up a little bit, and we had a really good engaging conversation. People participated in that, and it felt like it was starting on a path back towards like real community. So I'm hoping this year for us, as we run 3 more of these things, that we can just keep learning better ways to use those tools, the technologies that are available to like create a really welcoming space in a virtual way. And, I'm not going to lie, I miss going to events and stuff, so I'm hoping that maybe I can attend a Columbus Web Group sometime soon.
Well, we're hoping to have events again soon as well.
Yeah.
So looking kind of more towards the future, what areas are you thinking about for growth?
Yeah, personally, I mentioned this earlier, but personally, I now have I just went through a 360 review with my entire team, and we do a lot of reviews at Sparkbox every 6 months. We go through a pretty intense review process, so we ask a lot of our employees in terms of offering feedback. And so this time we brought somebody in to sort of run a 360. They developed a survey based on kind of core leadership, skills, and everybody on the team had the ability to fill that out. And then the consultant that we brought in sat down with our director team, our leadership team, and asked them, did actual interviews around the same kinds of questions. So I have both qualitative and quantitative feedback from almost my entire team now. And so I've spent the last month kind of digging into that. A lot of good and a lot of stuff that were areas where I can grow, And I think I'm looking for ways to try to put a lot of that feedback into action now. And so that same individual who came in to run the 360 is going to we're engaging with them to stay on as a coach for me, and Rob and I together will be meeting with them. Just, I think as we scale, we're trying to make sure we do that in a really healthy way. And everybody has blind spots, every person does. And so I think trying to look for opportunities to see what those are, you just have to open yourself up to critical feedback. And our team is really good at offering that feedback. We've practiced that a lot. And so I got so much good input. So personally, I'm really looking forward to digging into some tried and true leadership practices and trying to put some of that into place. Organizationally, I think I'm excited that we're finding some ways to incorporate some of the thinking we have in terms of inclusive design and accessibility and performance and just all the things that make really good products. I'm excited about incorporating those things into the work in ways that allow it to sort of grow beyond what we can just do. We've, for the last 6 or 7 years, been doing a lot of design system work, and I've spent the last few months kind of in a hole, basically a writing room, just doing a lot of thinking. We each year we do a design system survey. So this will be our 4th year doing it. It's actually live right now. So if folks are interested, if they're doing design system work, I'll make sure I give you all a URL to share with them where they can fill out the survey and contribute their experiences. So this will be our 4th year. And before we develop the survey each year, I reach out to bigger organizations that have participated in the past. And I just ask for a little bit of their time so I can get a pulse on what's happening in the industry around design systems. And this year, I had so many good conversations with people. There's a lot of interesting things happening. Design systems are maturing to a point now where people are either deciding we're going all in on this, or they're just scrapping them, or they're starting over from scratch. And so it's like an inflection point for sure with systems. And after doing that this year and looking back through all the data we've gathered over the last 3 years and all the conversations I've had over the last 3 years with people doing this work, something started to sort of crystallize a little bit for me. So I'm really excited. The unconference that we're going to do at the end of June is actually going to be a workshop on design systems. To be, I think, around 3 hours. And it's going to be deep diving on a maturity model for design systems that we're developing. There's so many interesting insights. I'm really excited about this. But the thing that gets me the most excited about it is that we have always struggled in the industry to get people who are more technically minded interacting in healthy ways with folks who are more, design or creatively minded. I hate to use the word creative because everybody's creative. I truly believe that. But folks who care more about sort of the experience versus folks who care more about the logic underneath. They're just, it's true you can have folks who are good at both, but a lot of times we segment people in our organizations, right? We put the developers in one area and the designers in another area. And I can't tell you over the last 12 or 13 years how many meetings I have sat in with client teams, representatives from both of those groups or many others, where it's so tense, it's just thick in the room, that tension. And I have been trying to find a way to remove that tension. I think that it exists everywhere, and it's kind of mind-boggling to me because we are literally all on the same team. And so for me, I think I'm excited because I actually believe design systems are a way to do that, right? They become the language, the common language that developers and designers can speak. And there's benefits for every other discipline inside the organization too. We're not talking enough about how design systems can serve your QA team or your UX folks or your project managers or product owners. There's so many things that they can do in an organization. So the maturity model, I think, gives an example of a very healthy way to create a stable, sustainable system and evolve it over time in ways that actually engage all those disciplines, and it can really truly show some real benefit in the organization. So, and it's a unifying force, it is the common language. So that gets me really excited. It's fun to sort of emerge from that hole of thinking and writing and share some of those high level ideas with people and see those light bulbs coming on already, So I'm pretty pumped about that.
So we've had a lot of discussion on design systems being a growth area for you, but what's next?
Well, what's next for me is kind of more of the same. I think Sparkbox is growing. We were very fortunate to stay healthy through the pandemic, and we have a lot of really cool opportunities ahead of us. A lot of those do involve design systems, so I think we'll continue to push forward in that area. I'm looking for really fun ways to put some of the thinking I've been doing to use with our clients, so I'm excited about that opportunity. Personally, I am, I've got 2 kids at home that are, entering, junior high and high school soon, and so I think I've got a lot to learn in terms of parenting. Culturally at Sparkbox, we're always trying to be a better place to work, so we'll be looking for opportunities to grow the kinds of things that we offer our employees, and looking for ways to stay connected with each other, I think, in challenging times. We've been spending a lot of time removing bias from every process we can find, and so I think we always will have work to do in that. I mentioned we have engaged a consultant to help us with some DEI stuff, so we're doing some leadership workshops there. There's so much more, all of it kind of comes back to this idea of scaling the business in a healthy way. We, at the end of the day, we want to make a bigger impact. Our mission is to create a better web, essentially, and so we really want to find a way to do that, to make a bigger impact on that. I think that we can be very creative in the way that we think about that. Our alumni from Sparkbox who move on to do other work are going to take some of the things they learn with us to new places, and that's a way that we can continue to grow that idea. The workshops, teaching other folks how to do that. Apprenticeship programs, where we're bringing folks in and literally training them to do this work well. So I think we're trying to think very broadly about how we can create a better web. But we have some task forces now, one in particular that's really focused on accessibility, that has helped us as an organization be able to just offer a lot more truly skilled professionals in that space. I think we've always talked about accessibility. We have the people to back it up for sure right now. So that's really neat. I don't know. There's a lot.
Yeah, that's a huge list.
Yeah.
So thanks, Ben, for taking the time to meet with us today.
Always a pleasure.
So in closing, is there anything else that you would like to add to what we've talked about today?
If folks are doing design system work, that survey will be open for another couple weeks. So we would love to have their input on that. It's huge. The more people we get to fill that out, the better data we have. And we will take all of that data. We will dig into it and try to understand the trends that we're seeing. And then we'll release that for the public for free, for folks to learn from. I mentioned the unconferences we're running. If people are, again, this is going to be at the end of June, and it is a deep dive on design systems. And I think it's going to be really helpful for people, no matter what stage of growth you're at. Even if you're just thinking about starting one, it's going to be helpful. We're going to have some resources available for folks on that. We recently released a UX toolkit. If you're into doing usability testing or user, that kind of studies, that kind of thing, there's a great resource out for folks to better understand how to find the right people to run a test. One of our folks on the team put that together, and it's just a really cool resource. So there's lots of neat stuff. I can share some of that with you if you want to offer links to folks, but stay strong, keep focused, try to stay in learning mode. That's what I would say.
Fantastic. And we'll take those links and we'll include them with both the recorded video and the live event.
Excellent.
So Thank you again, Ben. It's been great chatting with you today.
Cheers.
If you'd like to find more about Sparkbox, you can find them on the web at sparkbox.com. If you'd like any more information about the resources Ben mentioned, we'll include links. Thanks for joining us.